there's a part of me that wants to create a template so that people can see the steps to take to liberate themselves from whatever suffering they've been put through by the unconscious projections imposed on them. And so when I had my aha at age 28, taking grade 1 public school, learning to read and count, and finding out that I'm not retarded, it's just like my whole identity dissolved. There was no more Stanley the retard and all the negative putting down, making fun of me because I was creative and all that. Sissy, fairy, pansy fruit, you name the label, I got it. Christ killer and all that stuff. And so I go into the foster home and I asked to see a psychiatrist to find out why I can't read or count. And that was prior to grade 1 at age 28. And he said, what you've been through is far more devastating than a concentration camp experience. His name was Dr. Tuckty, and he was the consulting psychiatrist to the Board of Education. And he said, I said, what do you mean concentration camp? You know, picturing dead bodies. He said, because in a concentration camp, you know who the enemy is. And you had no one to validate your reality. That's really crazy making, and it's amazing you survived intact. And then he said to me, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, well, they're building bomb shelters. I'd like to understand why we have wars and prejudice and generation gaps and violence and alienation and depression, suicide, crime, murder, etc. He said, well, do it. And he encouraged me to do it. And so he was my first educator, really, at 20. So I saw him for a few years. And then when my foster father was encouraging to me too, and he had a complex life. His mother had sex with him from the time he was 11 years old till he was an adult. And you know, he ended up being with MI5. A very deep and wise and sensitive man, but what a trauma to go through. So that's helped me understand why he took me in at 20 when I couldn't read or count. And he married, and he was English Anglican, part Belgian, part Gypsy. My foster mother was Catholic, Italian, Irish, and French. So I start seeing the trap of all these group identifications. So anyway, and then I went to California, my grade 1, came back to Toronto, and unmasked audiences, not carrying the weight of all the secrets and lies that my parents, my whole family carried. So I designed I'm a Person First button after I met the Dr. Paul Simonoff in California, who came from Moscow to study the hippies. And he was a psychophysiologist and psychiatrist, and he said, he's going to teach me Russia's top secret. And I said, really? He said, yes. 3 words, fear, anger, information. Fear causes anger, information cancels out the fear, cancels out the anger. So I thought, and I said to him, well, fear causes anger, fear causes labels. Labels kill. Information can kill the fear, angers, and labels. And that's how the design of the I'm a Person First label liberation button was born. And so he said to me, you're the most real person I've met in America. And I couldn't handle a compliment because now I understand the jealousy and envy my parents had for their siblings, and this friend Harvey had. He used to threaten to kill me if I was ever successful. He said, Stanley, eat shit and die, and if you're ever successful, I'm going to kill you, over and over and over again. So I was terrified of the jealousy and envy of other people. And then the funny thing happened is in California, the psychologist, Carl Faber took me under wing. And he said, you're teaching me as much as I'm teaching you about projection. He saw me for 3 years and didn't charge me. He said, there are about 7 people every century who are really, really awake, very intuitive, and great knowledge and empathy that comes from like a transcendent understanding. And he said, you're one of them. I said, well, if I'm one of the 7, you must be one of the 7 to know I'm one of the 7. And so I couldn't handle any compliment. Really, Justin, you're brilliant. And I just couldn't take it in. Here I'm the retard taking grade 1 at the same time that I'm doing my research to try and get to the core of human conflict. But I was perplexed. How can I be brilliant? Anyway, I'm walking on campus, and these guys are past them, and they mention some. I heard the word brilliant. Someone's brilliant. So I stopped. I said, they're talking about someone being brilliant. Carl just said a few minutes ago that there's only 7 brilliant people every century. How dare that person be brilliant, whoever they're talking about? If Carl's one of them, I'm the other. Well, there's not very many more. And then I watched my thoughts and the emotions and the fury and the jealousy and envy I had. And then watching the thoughts, I was able to let go and see the craziness. I started laughing. And I talked to the guys. They were engineers. They were talking about someone who was very brilliant. And I, from that time on, there was an overview. And I was no longer identified with that program mind. But of course, I worked with Eric Byrne and Dr. Byrne of Games People Play and Fritz Perls and Virginia Satir. They all took me under wing. And so I was really being hothoused to wake up and see what is to answer the question why we hurt, why we make other people suffer. And so I then designed I'm a Person First button, Labor Liberation, and I went unmasked to audiences in Toronto, London, and Paris. And I was interviewed by media, and literally thousands of letters before internet start coming in wanting more information. When I went to London, I unmasked as a joker in the card game, in monologue, song, and dance. And Queen Elizabeth's senior servant, Edward Jones, said, "You're a real 20th century court jester speaking truth to power." And he helped me in and out of my costume right in front of the audiences. Now, he had a kidney disease that was not curable at the time. So he was a man who knew he wasn't going to be living long. And there was tremendous depth and sensitivity to him, and it gave me a sense of worth and value, which I had been lacking in my life. And then when the audiences really embraced me there, and this one man yelled, "This is changing my life," and all that, as I was the oratory of 52 cards equal 52 cards. We're all Noah. All we have to do is realize we're the ark, and we take in 2 of every kind of people. And then we can rise above the flood, Jacob's ladder from hell to heaven, rubberize it into a cycle, journey through the hell and heaven of it all, and move the ladder away, the Now Testament. And I remember I shared that in a debate with 2 Arabs when Rabbi Feinberg didn't show up. They rushed across the stage and hugged me, and the moderator began to yell, "We can't have this, get back to the business at hand." We had gotten to the business at hand. There was nothing left to moderate. And they saw me as a human being first. Process, energy, change, matter. And therefore we all matter, as I saw them. So the next day, Rabbi Feinberg said, "What did you say? Haven't you gone too far?" Then he took the 7 pages on labor liberation, said it was his own. Then when I went to London, to the Roundhouse, Eckhart Tolle was depressed and suicidal in the audience. And he had his aha. And but what he did is he then told his followers that to forget your story. And that was a really manipulative thing to do, because he was turning himself into the leader and having followers by keeping certain secrets that you have to be in touch with your story and marry that to the psychology and the philosophy and spirituality, which he benefited from when I brought it all together. And and then I shared in Paris and then came back to Toronto. And certain people who hold a winning hand, someone threatened to kill me if I didn't become his lover, work with him at the film board. With what you've learned, the 2 of us would be very powerful together. So certain people in a position of power will do anything to sabotage someone else. So George Rohn, the head of International Mental Health, Canadian Mental Health, had me be their keynote speaker in 76. But in 72, when Mark Slade from the film board tried to sexually assault me and I fought him off, and he put the death threat in writing, I thought I was immune. No one's going to get to me. I figured it all out. And actually, my ego was two things. Maybe too much of an ego to think that no one's going to get to me, and not enough of a transcendent of the ego to ward off the toxicity of a sexual assault and a death threat. I became immobilized. I became traumatized. And then Rabbi Eisen came to see me to apologize for Rabbi Feinberg stealing my 7 pages on labor liberation, saw the love letter and death threat from Mark Slade, and said, you better see a lawyer. So he had me see Bill Graham. And Bill Graham said, asked me to share the whole cycle, said governments will save multi-millions of dollars in your research, and wrote something to the government to try and encourage the research being presented to everyone. And then offered me a lift home, stopped at his house, had me come up for a minute and raped me, and then held me down. You be quiet about this or else, like another death threat. So I actually became suicidal. And I fled Canada, went to the States for therapy, and was offered a scholarship to get a degree, BA, MA, PhD, but the most important degree people can give themselves on the website, the labor liberation degree, by alphabet in the palm of our hands. See everyone as a person first. Get beyond all alphabets. Labor liberation. So life unfolds, and it took me quite a while to be able to come back to life from the 2 sexual assaults and death threats. And lawsuit has been filed. And Bill Graham now says, he took me back to his house, but to listen to the musical album in his den. And he says that, I went to see him for I was looking for publicity for the album. I needed to talk to him, which Rabbi Eisen said to do, about the sexual assault and death threat, and that I was completely immobilized and I'd stopped sharing my cycle. So life unfolds. We'll see what happens with the media since Bill Graham then became Foreign Affairs Minister of Canada, and then Carolyn Bennett, when I came back to Canada, Dr. Bennett, I saw her as a family doctor, and she gets a letter from Ian Blue saying he needs verification. That I'm beginning, took me all that time, I departmentalized. I remembered Mark Slade's assault. I don't remember being able to fully articulate Bill Graham's assault. It was too much. You go to see a lawyer about a sexual assault, and he rapes you. I mean, it's like it was just, I couldn't handle remembering it till I got back to Toronto decades later. And then, so Carolyn Bennett kept saying to me, I want you to meet my husband. I don't know why she's saying that. And she promised she's going to verify that I'm talking about the flashbacks of Bill Graham's sexual assault and his, be quiet about this or else. And instead, she doesn't write the letter to Ian Blue, who understood that a chorus line was the chorus line that won a Pulitzer and made hundreds of millions of dollars, was based on my unmasking to audiences. But instead of having every baby born have 52 cards within, so that we all become, you can be your own star like I am. Yes, you can be really free. You're the whole pie. One symbols die. Write your own script, do your own thing. Ain't got what you ain't got, and that's a lot. Not like we've been taught. You can learn to entertain you. And so what happened is that was the theme, to welcome the world to discover the state of Joker, where we all become star of our own life. Every baby born, no matter what country we're from, or ethnic group, or background, or gender, or sexual preference, whatever. But what happened is the LA Times did a 3-page feature in their calendar section verifying the plagiarism from related to a chorus line, Joseph Papp and Michael Bennett. And so, because Carolyn Bennett, nothing to do with him, with Michael Bennett, because she didn't write the letter verifying I'm talking about the flashbacks, and said she called Bill Graham, stopped delivering babies, and joined him as a politician in the Liberal Party. So life's a trip, and it's a matter of being able to handle everything that happens with respect that people are to various degrees asleep various degrees awake, but we all, in essence, have 52 cards within.